Welcome to Story Hour, a virtual meetup hosted by Wolf and Heron.
Doug, the floor is yours whenever you're ready.
Have you ever had Amarula? It's like Bailey's, but better. It's made from the fruits of the Amarula tree. It's in southern Africa. It's a particular favorite of elephants who eat the fermented fruit and get just a bit tipsy. So the first time I had it, I was in South Africa. I was in Cape Town, more specifically, Langa Township, actually. I was in a driveway playing cards in those little plastic lawn chairs with a few friends. And Langa is one of the townships in South Africa that's a legacy of apartheid. Is one of the oldest. And I didn't know enough about it and I still don't. I knew even less at the time. For me, this was the first time I was in a country where I was the minority. I'm an American, I'm white, I grew up eating dinner with my parents at home every night. I also wanted to save the world. Thought it was what I was supposed to do. So over that cup of Amarula, I got the chance to ask my host, about 50 years old, about the neighborhood. Told me about how it was developed, about the house, the additions they had made, what they do now, how they get around, who is in the neighborhood now generally. It was really important to him to tell us why it was special that we were there. And we were in a happy place. We were buzzed, drinking that really sweet liquor, and feeling really comfortable inside the house, inside the gate. And at that time, about 10 years ago, white people didn't, generally still don't, go to Langa by choice. It's up the M1 route. You pass a lot of neighborhoods that a lot of people don't go to. His mom joined us in the driveway to tell us why she had opened her house and her life to us. She was probably, old enough that she had trouble walking. She had to shuffle around, and she had a chair that looked very well worn in the driveway. And she also wanted us to learn about who her family was, how they got there, and how amazing it was that we were there with her in public. And it's incredibly embarrassing to admit that I don't remember her name. Somewhat unsurprising considering I couldn't even make the correct click sounds to say hello in Xhosa. But nevertheless, I told her I was sorry this had happened to her. And what she told me next really changed my life. She said, "Why are you sorry? Did you do this? Were you here? You don't need to apologize to me. You're not responsible for this." And she's just totally right. My well-meaning apology didn't mean anything. Who am I to claim responsibility for apartheid as an American? I didn't do any of that. I was simply learning about what others had done. I had Amarula yesterday. It's so good in the summer. It's a giant ice cube in a rocks glass. Even a small amount feels so fancy. And when I have it, and all its creamy, amazing, cold, exotic self, I think about where I've been and what I've done. But I'm in the United States now. So I also reflect on what I might need to learn and what I might need to take responsibility for. It's really jarring to me that I still don't know the names of people that I should, but at least now I can speak in my own language.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for letting us put you on the spot.
Really quick, I've been to Langa Township.
Yeah, me too, I have.
Never met anyone else who's been there, and I was like, that's weird. That's awesome.
Two people.
That's pretty funny. Okay, what did Doug do well? Stephanie.
I really liked the thread of the Amarula as just a way to connect all the different pieces. And I liked that you had it yesterday. I don't know if you did, but that was a nice little detail. There were lots of it felt like a thread that connected everything in a very artful way.
What else did? Go ahead, Molly.
Sorry, I'm not raising.
Okay.
That's probably the norms that I need to recognize. The way you described it was really engaging. Like you did it in a different way every time you brought it up in the story, and so it like reintroduced like this theme that you felt like you could connect to more and more as the story went on. So I really liked that.
I want to echo the Amarula clothesline effect. I thought that was very effective. Even though your first words were about Amarula, and it gave me the impression that that's what the story was going to be about. The story had nothing to do with Amarula, but you used it as a clothesline, and you strung together a whole bunch of things that did cohere. And the Amarula didn't get in the way, surprisingly. It worked rather well.
Thank you. Milo.
So I think that the way that Doug told that story was excellent, because I think I forget who just said it, but the pieces, every time that you mentioned something, you gave additional information. Most people want to describe something so you get a good idea of it right when they introduce it, but what you did is you kind of kept the story going and gave people information as they needed to hear it. So I thought that was quite brilliant. Also, the characters in your story were full of life. They weren't just somebody that you introduced, but you gave them a background so that we can now see people interacting with each other rather than you just kind of taking information in. And of course, I do also want to be excited because I have been there. So I didn't think anybody else would go over there.
It's amazing. It's other folks.
Yeah, I had to catch a cab out of there, which was interesting. So, all that, but very cool. And I do think that it's interesting that you tied in an exotic substance and talked about elephants and stuff to kind of give us this idea of fantasy when you started talking about it, and then brought us down to reality with apartheid and the way that people are being treated. So it's kind of like you introduce this beautiful, fantastic concept and kind of give the jarring reality of it. And I think that grounds people and allows them to start paying attention to you. So I think that was a very good tactic as well.
Thanks.
Okay, what could Doug experiment with or try differently next time? Stephen.
By the way, I spent 2 years living in Lesotho, so I can relate to a lot of what you were talking about there. And I remember summarizing my life as an educational experience. Those 2 years learning about apartheid was a big element of my development as well. I think actually your theme would improve if you wrote this down. I don't know if you have written it, but if you put it on paper and looked at the theme you were trying to produce and started pairing out details, the elephants can go. Other things you might find you can add to this story. If the story really is about your education, or if it's something else, that it's up to you to decide what it is. But I think you can tighten this.
Yeah,
and it's a nice story. I love your ambition here.
Yeah, my ambition is a lot bigger than that. And I think I missed the base of it. It was to try and connect the learning and reflection of and ownership that I should feel for the way America is operating right now and the racial segregation we've seen, and that I'm responsible for. I have a responsibility to speak up because I do speak the language. I don't know people's names. When you say their names, like I don't know everyone. I haven't been paying attention in the way that I could. Yeah. So but I would really appreciate that. That's great feedback to think about how to target that.
John, go ahead.
Me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, the elephants can't go. I loved that detail. I thought it was such a thoughtfully and artfully told story, and the last few lines, I just didn't. You kind of lost me. Like, it didn't rob me of the enjoyment or the impact of the story exactly. I just didn't understand. I think there was something between the lines that I didn't pick up on, like when you said, now I can speak the language.
Yeah.
No, it was maybe too nuanced or something, because I didn't understand exactly, like, this obviously influenced your worldview in some way. And some of that, to some extent, that was clear, but then the takeaway wasn't really clear. It was just I walked away feeling like it was a thought-provoking and enjoyable story, but without a clear takeaway.
Yeah, thanks. Makes sense.
One piece of advice that we give people sometimes, and I think this actually was all three of us, we had like a paragraph at the end that was like the theme paragraph, the resolution paragraph. And it was a separate moment and a separate place from the rest of the story. So you can do that, but probably the more sophisticated thing that we could all work on is what is a way of actually just continuing the story that is weaving in whatever message you're trying to share. So if the story took place somewhere else, but now you're in the US and there's something going on here today, is there a moment, a story moment, like a little micro moment that you could physically be in where the point that you're trying to make would come out without you shading around it in some ways? Like that would be something to think about.
And I think I want to add a qualification to what I just said too, because I really appreciate nuance. We probably all do for writers and storytellers and stuff. And so just don't, like, keep some of that nuance, because I think with something like this that is obviously, there's like some cultural relevance, to what's going on right now. It's really easy to just sprinkle in like liberal platitudes about race or something. And so, it's good you did a really good job of not resorting to cliche or platitudes. But you took it just like maybe a half step. Maybe you could just reel it in, like tighten it up a little tiny bit. So there's still nuance, but a little, because there's a balance, right? Between just like, there's the whole show don't tell thing. I don't know. I think
it really makes sense. And I think two things come to mind too. And I'm still pretty new to the storytelling game. So Karen and Stephanie, correct me if I'm wrong. One of the things that I was thinking about, thanks. So I'm a former teacher, that led me to be a teacher. And in thinking about this, I worked forward through my story. So I told my story and then I worked through forward again. And what I could do, or what I think the next step for me to do, is work backwards now. So I've told the story. I know where I want to get to, clarify that, and then work backwards to make sure, am I touching on these points throughout? And then that would also see, I can recognize those points earlier, to Kara's point, integrate without having to be so separate at the end and dangle, if it makes sense, if that opportunity is there. Because what I'm hearing from actually a lot of folks is that it could even, like the elephant analogy, could even get further. Like, am I an elephant just drinking the juice and getting drunk and like trampling stuff? Or am I doing something more? like there's all sorts of stuff there that like I could probably play with, but unless I work backwards from where I want to get to, it's not going to be very transparent. So
this is why you work stories.
It's all good feedback. Yeah, this is really helpful feedback, everyone. Thank you.
Mila.
So as we're discussing this, I think what we're discovering is this is quite a complex topic to be discussing. And I'm getting the sense that you had this larger vision for what you wanted to express. But, and I don't mean to use this word to discourage you, but it felt clumsy the way that you did bring it to life with the story. And I'm only saying this after listening to everything that we just said about this. The reason I say that is because it's such an important topic. It's relevant. It's happening right now. And so I think when we do express personal experiences like this, it does kind of, we have a responsibility to be careful and to prepare for it. I'm not saying you did a bad job, because you didn't. You did a great job. I told you that it was a great story. But if you are going to present this in front of an audience, I think we should be more considerate with clearing that message up, eliminating any noise in it as well, and having a more direct path to what the takeaway from it is. So that's the only thing I can say with regard to how you can improve it.
Totally.
Well, and the audience for a story like this might not be like an audience. It might be one or two other people where you're, I think part of what you're doing is sharing a vulnerability and admitting perhaps that there's growth. And so I think, yeah, like think about all of that. And at the same time, again, like this is something else that has come up on the call before. It depends on who you're speaking to, how raw or how polished or how, like what the environment is. So, I mean, all things to play with.
Yeah.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask her?
Yeah,
sorry.
go ahead.
Do you have time for me to ask one question?
Yeah.
I didn't share what I learned from this. Is that something that would have helped, or did people appreciate that it was sort of open-ended? You can make assumptions or fill in what you might have learned.
Stephen.
I mentioned earlier that I recognized your ambition, and I think you understood me as saying that I recognized your life ambition. What I really meant to say was that your ambition in this talk was to reflect on, to take some real world anecdotes and show us how that revealed your naivete and how your education proceeded in those days in your visit to Langa. So I'll put that down as the theme of the talk. I may be wrong in this, and if I am wrong, that will teach you something. That your ambition was to talk about your development and confess that you were learning something. No, you don't have to tell us what you learned. I think the story was simply that you were learning something. Although it would be a different story to tell us what you learned.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Your theme would change. It doesn't mean it would be bad if you told what you learned, but you would have a different theme then.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense.
Final thought, John.
I think it's just base that entirely on, is it important to you personally? Because otherwise it'll feel forced. And I think it's really respectful of the audience. Like, if it's important to you personally, to like really make it clear, then do it. And if it's not, it's respect. I like that you were respectful of your audience. I feel like I might not be real clear because I sound like I'm going back and forth.
No, it's helpful.
I do think it like shows respect for your audience that you don't like bludgeon them over the head with like, and this is what you should take away from this. Like, a little bit of, you leave it to us to interpret to an extent. So
well, thank you. Thank you everyone for the feedback. I really appreciate it.
Visit wolfandheron.com to find out more about our story hours.